Thanks everybody for coming tonight. Appreciate it. Back to back for Austin. Very impressive. Good for you. Mr. Kopelman. I wanted to thank Eddie and Zelda Zemmel for sponsoring the shiur in memory of Serena Nachamovich, whose yahrzeit is Beis Adar. And also Mazel Tov on the birth of a great-grandson, to the grandchildren Yisrael and Nava Zweig, and a Mazel Tov to the grandmother Chavi Zweig. So Mazel Tov to them. And it should be an aliyah for the neshama of Serena Nachamovich. Tonight's shiur is on the topic of a karsatov. So just to start with a story, just to understand the human psyche behind the karsatov, and then we're going to try to understand the Torah perspective on this amazing midah that we'll see is so essential to Judaism that without it, you might have to doubt your yichus if you don't have a karsatov. That's how serious it is. So imagine, this happens every year, that some nice Jewish man with a beard comes and he knocks on the door of some unsuspecting individual and he says, "Hi, it's nice to meet you. I notice you have a lot of palm trees on your property. Do you mind if I give them a free cut?" And this non-Jew says, "Whoa, this is amazing. These Jews are so sweet. They just knock on strangers' doors and offer to cut their trees for free." And this guy is outside and he's this huge property and he's working all day just for free, taking down palm branches and filling up his truck. And then he goes to the neighbor and he does the same thing. And this guy, he can't believe it. These Yidden are just so sweet. They're just going around and cutting people's trees for free. It's so beautiful. So, okay, that's one story that happens. Flip side, this happened to the place where I work in the afternoons, Rabbi Smith. He has a base medrash, and he has also palm trees all over the place. I don't know why this is a phenomenon with palm trees. And these palm trees are covered in coconuts. And this Jamaican man comes up and he says, "Do you want me to take down your coconuts? You know they're a hazard. You could have people walking under them and the coconut can fall on their head." So he says, "Wow, that's so true. I never thought of that." "Yeah, for sure, take down my coconuts." And this Jamaican man takes this giant ladder and he climbs up this 40-foot tall tree and he just starts hacking away at coconuts. And for about an hour, he's doing this very difficult work, again, for free. And this man is taking down all of Rabbi Smith's coconuts. And he's like, "Wow, what a nice Jamaican man. I guess in the islands they teach manners. And people just go around doing all this sweetness." So of course, we know the answer. So that non-Jew, he finds out from his Jewish neighbor after he looks down the block and he sees there's these huts all over the community. And on top of the huts are these palm branch trees, right? These palm trees, the branches. And he goes over to his friend and he says, "Hey, what are these things?" He says, "It's sukkahs." And he says, "We have these sukkahs. We have to build these huts for the holiday." And he says, "Wow, they're so interesting. It's so nice. You have a holiday. At least these things probably don't cost you much, right?" He's like, "Whoa, are you kidding? You see that canopy? That's $300 right there." What do you mean $300? He says, "Every one of those branches is $3. He says, $3? He's like, "Wait a minute. There was a Jew here the other day that was pruning all of my trees for free." And he realizes, oh my gosh, those sneaky Yidden, they know how to make a buck. And that's what he was doing to all my neighbors. And suddenly, all of that gratitude he felt for that Jew turns into disdain. And he says, "What a sneaky Jew." That's how he feels. And the same thing when you find out that these Jamaican guys that go around the community collecting coconuts, are not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They are chopping them open and taking out the coconut milk, the coconut water, and they're selling it for $5 for these little jars at the swap shop. And they're taking out the coconut and they're making money. That's what they're doing. They're making money. So suddenly that feeling of gratitude just slips away and he says, "Okay, the guy was in it for a buck, whatever. At least I got a little free coconut cleaning off my trees, but you don't feel any karsatov." So is that correct? Is that correct that when one individual is profiting off of something and we benefit, should we feel a karsatov? I'll take it even a step further, something that happens every single day. You go into a restaurant and you sit down and you can't believe it. This guy is just asking you what you want to eat and he's writing it down and then he brings it to you fresh. He's serving you. He's actually serving you. And when your water runs out, he's filling up your cup and you're like, "What is this guy doing? Amazing." And at the end, he gives you a bill and it's $50. So again, it's his job, of course. So should you feel a karsatov for a waiter? Should we feel a karsatov for these people? What is a karsatov? That's our question tonight. What is the Jewish concept of a karsatov, and when should a person feel gratitude al pi Torah? Now, to go to our first source, which is also going to be a question before we start getting to the answers, but when we see the first time that thanks and gratitude is expressed in the Torah is by Yehuda. By Yehuda, when specifically the word Hapam Ode Es Hashem, that right, Leah says, now I'm going to thank Hashem. So all the Mefarshim are bothered. What do you mean now I'm going to thank Hashem? You already had 3 children. This is number 4. Now you're going to thank Hashem. So Rashi on the spot tells us, why is she thanking him now? Why is she thanking Hashem now? Because she knew prophetically that there would be 12 tribes. Which means if you have 4 wives, or 2 concubines, 2 wives, but 4 women, 12 tribes, so everybody gets 3. She gets 4, so then it's more than her chelik. She gets 1 more than she expected, and now she thanks Hashem. Okay, that's a nice explanation about why this is different than 1, 2, and 3, but it doesn't explain why she didn't thank Hashem for the first 3. But it's going to give us an inkling and shed some light into the human psyche of appreciation. So we're going to go back to that, but it's very interesting that you only thank Hashem when you get number 4. Okay, so where do we find gratitude in the Torah? We're going to try to have, whenever you try to understand the Torah perspective on something, so a lot of times the Torah is not going to address it head on and explicitly. You're going to have to look through Chazal, through Midrashim, and through Psukim that are kind of in a roundabout way discussing this concept of a karsatov. So one of the places that we find it in Parshas that we just went through is when Moshe Rabbeinu is commanded to perform the first 3 makas. Dam Tzvardei Akinin. So when you go through the Psukim, you'll notice that the individual who is always taking the staff and smacking the water, smacking the earth, is Aaron. Aaron's the one that's actually bringing about all of the makas. So Rashi explains on the spot, why is this happening? Because Moshe had karsatov. What was his karsatov? Because the water saved his life. Because when he was a baby and he was put into the little basket, so the river saved his life. It floated him off to safety. And not only that, but the dirt of the earth also saved his life, because when he killed the Mitzri, so if any Egyptian found him out, he would have been put to death, but the earth did him a tova, and it swallowed up this Mitzri, and he was safe. So we see for the first time that Chazal is really mentioning this interesting idea of specifically karsatov is with inanimate objects. Inanimate objects. It's very interesting. Moshe Rabbeinu had to have a karsatov for water. When little kids learn this, they even ask the question, the water is going to notice when Moshe Rabbeinu hits it? The water has feelings? So when you're little, you're like, yeah, the water has feelings. That's how your Mora teaches you. But we know the water doesn't have feelings. What do you mean, karsatov? You can't hit the water, you can't hit the earth. It's a mitzvah, a tzivui from Hashem. He's telling you to bring about the makos. Why can't you do this? Because they have feelings? Of course they don't have feelings. So, first of all, that sheds light on a very important aspect of a karsatov, which is, it seems that from the Torah, karsatov has nothing to do with the individual that you are showing gratitude towards. Because even if it's an inanimate object, you are chayiv, you're obligated to show a karsatov. Even if that thing cannot feel the gratitude that you're giving whatsoever, you're still chayiv in a karsatov. Another example that's also brought in these parshios is that when Klal Yisrael were leaving Mitzrayim, so it says, Kelev lo yecharatz leshono, that none of the dogs barked. And again, it says there that Hashem gave a mitzvah to the Jewish people that if we ever have meat that's not kosher, that's treif, so you throw it to the dogs. Why? Because we have to have a karsatov that they didn't bark at us. So first of all, that's another interesting thing. Barking is not nice. Right? Barking is not nice. Not like the dog saved our life. He didn't do something proactive to help us. He just didn't bark at us. He didn't bark at us. That's pretty interesting. That means that if you know someone who's a thief and he doesn't steal from you, so you should have a karsatov because his nature is to steal. He's a thief. But if he didn't steal from me, I have to express gratitude towards him. So it's very strange. It's another right, puzzle piece to put together to understand what is a karsatov. It seems to be, again, not only does it have nothing to do with the other individual, but even if you feel that you're benefiting from the lack of a negative, you also have to have a karsatov. That takes tremendous sensitivity. Tremendous sensitivity to recognize when someone is not doing something bad to you, you have to appreciate them. You have to appreciate what's being done for you. So we're getting a little bit of an idea as to the sensitivity that's required. First of all, it has nothing to do with the other individual or their intentions. And it has nothing to do with the fact that they actually did you a proactive good. Even someone who just doesn't harm you, but it was their nature to harm you, you actually have to feel appreciation for them. That's a pretty low bar. Okay, so it's very, very interesting as we're putting the pieces together to understand the Torah's perspective on a karsatov. Now, there's a very, very interesting Chassam Sofer. Now we're going to get to, it's going to be even more puzzling, even stranger. Okay, Chassam Sofer says that why didn't Hashem have the Jewish people fight a battle against the mitzvah? It would have been sweet, sweet nakama, right? Sweet vengeance and a really good taste for the Jewish people if they got to strike down the very people that were striking them down for 210 years. That would have been a very good feeling. Hashem did want to give them some semblance of a good feeling because he spit their bodies out onto the beaches after Kriyas Yamsuf so that the Jewish people could watch their mitzvim die in front of their eyes and feel some sense of relief. But he didn't want the battle to happen, it seems. So Chassam Sofer says, why did they not fight the mitzvim? And he based himself on a midrash. And he says, listen to this, it's pretty crazy. He says, because the mitzvim did something very nice for the Jews. They let them live in their land for 210 years. What? They let them live in their land for 210 years? Not only that, but there's actually a halacha. The halacha says in the pasuk, Lo tetaev mitzri ki ger hayisa be'artza. You cannot oppress a mitzri because you were a ger in his land. Says Rashi, listen to this line. Afal pisha zarko zechureihem le'yor. Even though they took your baby boys and drowned them in the river, pretty intense. Matam, why should you still have a karsatov? Shahayu lechem achsanya b'sha'asa dechak. Because guess what? You had nowhere else to live. There was a famine. There was a famine that was happening, and you went to Mitzrayim, and they let you live in their land. They let you live in their land. Lefichach banim asher yoldu lahem dor shlishi yavo lahem bekal Hashem. Therefore, even if these Mitzrayim want to convert to Judaism, even though they killed millions, probably millions upon millions of Jews, they can convert. They can convert to Judaism because they did us a tova. They let us live in their land. Besides the fact that they killed our babies and enslaved us, and obviously they only let us live there for their own benefit because Yosef HaTzadik was the one who made them extremely wealthy and he took care of the whole country. Nevertheless, we have to have a debt of gratitude to these Mitzrim because they let us live in their land. It's almost like the Torah is avoiding any normal case of a karsatov. Right, we have inanimate objects, dogs for not barking at us. We have Mitzrim, even though they killed our babies, but they let us live in their land. So you see that the Torah's idea of a karsatov is definitely not what a person would expect. Now watch the flip side of a karsatov that the Torah tells us, something very, very strange. There's halacha that anyone or any male from the land of Ammon and Moab are not allowed to convert to Judaism. The only two nations that can't convert to Judaism. Okay, that means, just put into perspective, a Mitzri who killed millions of Jews is allowed to convert to Judaism after the third generation. We can forgive and forget because, says Rashi, they let us live in their land. They were nice to us. We have to have a karsatov. An Amaleki from Amalek, whose sole desire is to exterminate Jews, and we have a mitzvah to even kill their babies because it's guaranteed that any child from this progeny is going to kill you. Guaranteed. Hashem is giving you avtacha. There are all many Hitlers. Nevertheless, Hitler is allowed to become a Jew. Not only that, but it actually happened. In the Gemara it says that the Bnei Banim Shel Haman HaRasha, from Haman, they were teaching Torah in Bnei Brak. And there's a story of this general named Nebuzaradan, who he came to the base of Mikdash, and he saw there was this pile of blood boiling on the floor. And he asked the Jews, what's this pile of blood that's boiling on the floor? And they said, oh, don't worry about that. It's just some blood from some karbanos. And he said, really? So he said, bring me some animals and let's start shechting them. I want to compare the bloods. He said, they bring him an ox and he shechts it. He says, not the same. They bring him a goat, not the same. A sheep, not the same. And he says, don't play games with me. What is this blood? So they said, we don't want to tell you, but this is the blood of one of our prophets. There was a prophet. He was a Kohen. His name was Zechariah. And Zechariah was trying to admonish the Jews, and they stoned him to death. And his blood was sitting there on the floor of the Beis Hamikdash boiling. since the day they killed him, they tried to wash it off, and they said we couldn't get rid of his blood. It sat there boiling, bubbling blood. So he says, you know what? I'm going to make this blood stop boiling. I'm going to seek vengeance for this Zechariah. And he says, bring me all of your elders. So they bring all the tzaddikim, elders, and he kills all of them, 100 of them, kills all of these elders. And the blood's still boiling. So he says, bring me all your young Kohanim. They bring him all the Kohanim. He kills all of the Kohanim. Thousands of people. He kills all of them on the spot. The blood's still boiling. He brings the children, and he kills the children, and the blood's still boiling. And he says, Zechariah, I've killed the best of them. You want me to kill all of them? And finally, the blood stops boiling. Okay, so what does this Nebuzaradan say to himself? So he makes a kal v'chomer. He says, if for the innocent murder of this one individual, Hashem has taken a kama and allowed me to kill thousands and thousands of innocent people, so imagine what he's going to do to me for killing all these people. And it says immediately, he sent word to his family that he's giving away all his property, and he converted. He converted. Imagine that guy walks into your community and into your shul and tries to join the minyan. Like, he just killed thousands and thousands of people. We let him convert. He just killed thousands of Jews, men, young men, children. He's allowed to convert.
What was his name?
Nebuzaradan. He's allowed to convert. He was a general, Roman general. So he's allowed to convert. Amalek is allowed to convert. Who's not allowed to convert? Ammon and Moab. Why are they not allowed to convert? So listen to this. The halacha says, why are they not allowed to convert? So because when the Jewish people left Mitzrayim, so they were very thirsty and they were very weary, and they passed by the lands of Ammon and Moab, and they asked for some food and some water. And Ammon and Moab said, no, we're not helping. So Rashi explains, so why are they punished for that? Because Avraham Avinu saved their great-great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother when he saved Lot and Lot's daughters, and those were the grandfather and grandmother of Ammon and Moab. And since they lacked karsatov for something that happened generations earlier, they're never allowed to become Jews. You can't fix it. It's etched into their souls that they can't become Jewish. It's wild. They can't become Jewish. That's fascinating. That's the deal breaker. Murdering thousands of Jews, being from Amalek, not a problem. You don't have a karsatov, so that's it. You're out.
Israel did the same thing when Jews were exiled for the hot water, air.
But evidently, we didn't do anything for them that they should have had that same level of a karsatov. It wasn't necessarily the act of not helping. It was the fact that they didn't have a karsatov for what our great-grandfather did for their great-grandfather. It was a karsatov.
Where does Ruth come out from Moab?
Yeah, so because the derech of the nashim is not to go out, so they weren't expected to bring food out to the men of the Jewish people. The men were expected to go out, and the women were expected to stay at the camps and help prepare it, so that's why they weren't held accountable. But the men were held accountable, so that's why they can't convert. So you see something very, very fascinating about karsatov. It is so essential that without it, a person has to question whether they're Jewish. It's the most Jewish midah a person can have, is recognizing karsatov. Okay, so why do we not recognize karsatov? Or why does a person not necessarily feel this intense feeling of gratitude for people that are helping him? Especially when we saw inanimate objects. When's the last time you appreciated the dirt that's under your feet, or the tree that gave you shade? Like, when do you really feel an actual feeling of gratitude for these things? So the answer was taught to us by Leah. Hapam od es Hashem. Why did she thank Hashem for child number 4? So like Rashi explained, because she was expecting 3. She was expecting 3, and she got something more than she expected. That's the key to everything. Is what do you feel that you are due? What are you expecting?
So if you're entitled, you don't say thank you?
Yeah, that's what we said in the shiur. If a person has a feeling of entitlement, and it's an intense feeling of entitlement, he's lacking the most basic Jewish midah, the most basic Jewish trait, which is a karsatov. He's lacking it completely. The higher the threshold of expectation, the higher the threshold for a feeling of gratitude. Now, feeling gratitude is, first of all, it's the key to having human relationships. It's the key to creating this feeling of achdus and love between two people. It's this feeling of gratitude. That's between man and man. And it's also the key to the relationship between us and Hashem. If you look at modim, right, modim, which we say every day, look in modim and see what we're thanking Hashem for. We're literally thanking Hashem that we're alive. That's what modim is. You're thanking Hashem that you're alive. Like, even if nothing else happened in your day, right, and you couldn't do anything else and nothing positive happened, you're just thanking Hashem that you're alive. You have to say that 3 times a day to remember that I'm thanking Hashem because I'm alive. Even inanimate objects can generate a feeling of gratitude if you don't expect things from them, right? You expect a tree to give you shade. Who says? Who says he has to give you shade? Who says the water has to float you to safety if you're Moshe Rabbeinu? Or that the dirt has to swallow things up? Who says that's how the world has to work? It's because you have expectations. That's how basic these expectations can be. Right? There's a certain point of gratitude of a Moshe Rabbeinu where you actually feel gratitude for nature itself. Even though our expectation of nature is so basic because we live with it, you see it every single day. Right? It's probably the most ingrained expectation a person has is that the sun is going to go up and that it's going to set, and that eventually it's going to rain, and whatever, things grow and trees provide shade. It's so basic. A person can actually lower his threshold if he works on himself to feeling gratitude for nature itself. There's a story I wrote in one of the Divrei Torah a few weeks ago about Rav Gustman, that when Rav Gustman was a child, he was actually a teenager, and he was in the Holocaust, so he fled to the forests of Poland.
He trimmed the...
Yeah, that's what he said. Yeah. So he fled to these forests. Okay, he fled forests. So we'll go. You're right. We should back up. The Talmidim saw Rav Gustman mowing his lawn. Rabbi Leirfield also used to mow his lawn. I don't know about the story behind that.
He trimmed the hedges, the bushes.
You trim the bushes, and he would mow the grass. You trim the bushes and you mow the grass himself. Now this is the Gadol Ador. Rav Gustman knew Kol Torah Kula back and forth. He could have spent every moment of his day answering shilas and learning and dealing with the cow, but he was mowing his lawn and pruning his hedges. So his Talmidim couldn't believe it, and they just said, like, Rebbe, we don't want to have any chutzpah, but this seems to be beneath your kavod. You know, we're happy to pay someone else to trim your hedges. I know you're not doing it to save a buck. Your time is way too valuable. Why is the Rosh Hashiva doing this? So he answered them and he said, you know what, you're right. This is definitely beneath my kavod. I don't recommend that you spend your time mowing your lawn. But I have to mow my lawn because I have a karsatov. Why does he have a karsatov? So like we mentioned, when he was a teenager, he fled to the forests of Poland and he escaped the Nazis. And when he was in the forest, he survived by eating grass and leaves. There was no food. It was grass and leaves. And it was enough to keep him alive. So he said, I have a karsatov for grass and for leaves. So when I have grass and leaves growing in my front lawn and I have an ability to express that appreciation, I'm going to take advantage of it. He meant it, right? This is a human being that did not do this because we'd someday say a nice story about him and it would teach a lesson. His time was so valuable to him. Every minute was gold. And he was a venerable sage at this age. It wasn't in his younger years. And nevertheless, he was driving home this point. It's so crazy. It's so beautiful that we got to hear the story that his Talmidim asked him. If they didn't ask him, I'd never know. We thought like he's just really into gardening. There'd be a story like Rav Gustman always had a hobby. He loved gardening. And see, it's good to have hobbies. That's how the story would have played out if no one asked him. But we see that he had this midah of a karsatov that was so deep and so ingrained that he felt appreciation for the grass. So back to the beginning when we said that the Jews go around pruning trees, and then when you find out they're trying to make a buck, you lose that sense of a karsatov. Karsatov has nothing to do with the intentions of the individual that's providing you that benefit. It has nothing to do with that. If those two wires cross, so it means that a person is lacking in his midah, in his character trait of appreciation of gratitude. Because he's assuming that gratitude has to do with the intention of the one that's providing the benefit. But in Mitzrayim, they were literally killing our babies. They were enslaving the people, but they let us live there. Right? They let us live there. So we have to have a karsatov for the Egyptians. Because it has nothing to do, if the earth is providing you a benefit and the tree provides you shade, it obviously is not doing it because it loves you. It's not It's not consciously doing anything. Nevertheless, you have to have a karsatov. So you see that a karsatov is something mitzad us. It's coming from us. It has nothing to do with the other person. When I was in Kollel, Rav Kellerman, Florence Kellerman, for those who know him, he has something called the Musar Vadim. They're very, very popular. He gives them all over America, and he gives them in Eretz Yisrael. And he has these groups that get together, and they have a specific piece of Musar that they learn, and then you have a check sheet. And every day you have to get a check for reading that one page, and you have to learn it every single day. And he gives you an avoda that you have to do every single day, or a few times a week, whatever, different avodas, different exercises that you have to do. So the one for a karsatov was that when you went to a store and you bought something, or a waiter served you food, or you got on a bus, even if you paid, you have to really try to imagine in your head that you never paid this person $1. And you have to try to muster up gratitude and appreciation that the bus driver, this guy was driving down the street and he picked me up and he took me exactly where I needed to go. It's so sweet of him. It's not his, what does it have to do with the fact that it's his job? What does that have to do with the fact that you happen to have paid him some money for that? Does it change the fact that you got from point A to point B in a car and it would have taken you 3 hours to walk? No. He says you have to focus on the benefits that you accrue in life. And if you build that midah, so imagine the appreciation you feel for Hashem. Can you imagine how good and how much gratitude to be filled with every day you woke up and you take a breath? It's amazing when you think about gratitude that sometimes you look at a billionaire and you say like, wow, if I had what he had, then I'd feel some appreciation. Apam odes Hashem, right? I expect the Camry, but not the Lamborghini, right? So if I had the Lamborghini, that's when I feel a karsatov. So if you look at that billionaire, this is what Chaim Cohen says, and it was so amazing when I heard it for the first time. If that billionaire, right, let's say that billionaire has digestive issues and his stomach, he always has stomach aches, terrible, right? Or he's missing the tip of his finger. Would he give up $1 million to get back the tip of his finger? I think for sure. Let's say he walks with a limp. How much money would he give to fix that limp? So they go through $1 million surgeries every day. Like, he'd probably give up $1 billion to be able to run again, right? So the things that a healthy person has are worth more than all of the billions and billions of dollars that this billionaire has, because he would actually trade places with you for all of his money in 2 seconds. Right? If he has 6 children, lo aleinu, he would give up all of his money in a heartbeat to have healthy children. So a person with healthy children should feel more gratitude and more appreciation than Bill Gates for his position in life. Because he'd give it up in 2 seconds to have healthy children. When you realize that the basic things in life are so much more valuable than the icing on the cake, and that the things that really we focus on, because apam odes Hashem, because we're always looking for what's greater than our expectations. So then you realize that the most valuable things in life, right, the greatest things in life are free. Right? The most valuable things in life are those that are below the threshold of appreciation, because they're so basic that they're absolute necessities. If you can't breathe, so you die. So every breath you take is a gift. There's so many stories of people that had to be intubated from COVID, and then they were able to breathe again later on, and they appreciated every breath because they struggled to literally inhale just one breath of oxygen. They, wow, every breath I take is a gift, and they can actually feel it. So chas v'shalom, hopefully we don't have to go through something like that to lower that threshold. It can actually be accomplished just by trying to go through every day and recognizing the tova and the benefit that Hashem gives us. So a goal of being a Jew, like we said, for Ammon and Moab, they're not allowed to convert. If they lack gratitude, they can't convert, which means the more gratitude you have, the more Jewish you are. Right? The more Jewish, the more your neshama is connected to Hashem. That is probably the most essential Jewish trait. If you don't have it, you can never become a Jew. Never. No matter how many generations pass, they can't convert. They can never become Jewish. So it's probably one of the most important traits to nurture inside of a person. So how do you do this? You do it with practice. Like we said, one of those is the avoda that Rav Kelman said, but another one we're going to do tonight. So we have time left. So good. Okay, so I once took a course called Dale Carnegie. Has anyone heard of the Dale Carnegie courses? Yeah. Right? So Dale Carnegie wrote the book How to Win Friends and Influence People, among about 6 other books that he wrote that are all very excellent. Who's the Rav Victor Miller says that book is the Hakdama to Derech Eretz. the introduction to Derech Eretz. Even though the title sounds like you're trying to trick people, but if you read through the book, it's how to win friends and influence people. The book actually says it's all about being sincere, showing sincere appreciation, not criticizing, making other people feel good about themselves and feel important, but it has to be sincere. You have to actually find the good points in them. There's so much that overlaps with Musar and ideas in Torah, and nothing that I found that directly contradicts it, or Victor Miller recommended this book. So Dale Carnegie had a very interesting perspective on how to interact with people. So they give these courses, and part of the courses is to leave your comfort zone, but also to develop certain midas that enhance your interpersonal relationships. That's the whole idea of the course. So one of them, we actually had a series on a karsatov. One night was a karsatov. So the exercise we did at the end was very, very good. I'd like to do it with you tonight. And you have to think about someone that in your life, you never actually properly thanked. You never told them how much you appreciate them, mainly because you were given a high threshold of expectation from these people. It could very often be your parents, your Rebbe, because your Rebbe is supposed to take care of you. He's supposed to make hours of his time available to talk with you and to guide you spiritually, right? Your parents, of course, are supposed to feed you and clothe you and all these things. So people, or your boss that paid you and gave you your first job and enabled you to support your family. Obviously Hashem's giving it to you, but he's the shliach and he's the one that's helping along the way. So you have to feel appreciation for these people. So the avoda is that everyone's going to write a letter on this fancy thick paper to one of these people, and then I brought envelopes, and you're going to write the address on it, and I brought stamps, and I'm going to mail them out for everybody. And we're going to mail your letter to this person that you never thanked. A lot of times people only realize after that other individual is no longer in the world that they wish they'd written this letter. So everyone in this group that wrote this letter, they were so happy that they wrote it, that it was sent and received by that individual in their life. So that's our avoda for today. Okay, pens. Just take your time, there's no rush. But when you finish, you're allowed to go. So don't go too fast. But you have to think. And it doesn't have to be a long letter. You should write. It could be long if you want it to be long. It could be short if you want it to be short. So you're supposed to tell them I'm in a shiur, and the exercise for this shiur is that we're supposed to express our gratitude to someone that we never thanked. So so you don't feel awkward in writing a letter out of the blue that someone gets a handwritten letter. That's what we did in the Dale Carnegie course. So that's your first line, and then you can express in any way that you want.